Hello and welcome to a Python and Django live code hangout. Today we're going to be working on the Companionship Care app. If you've watched previous episodes, you might notice that the URL has changed. So if you'd like to access this source code, we're open source on GitHub. We decided to spin off the Companionship Care app into its own organization and start developing here and maybe use features like discussions in GitHub projects more prominently. For now, those features are enabled and primarily have been making use of issues. Grab my tea real quick. Today we're going to continue working on an issue I started previously. Check out these branches. We've started a feature for deleting scheduled activities. I think I've assigned myself here. Here it is. So I think we should be up to date with the branch. One moment. Cool. So previously, I had created the user interface. There we go. Interesting. I don't remember adding that. Changing that. Let's double check here what I've done here. In the project settings, I think it should default to debug mode false. What I can do is add new file. Setting debug to true, and I'm not going to check in this environment file by default. This contains some environment variables, and I'm using now the Poetry 1.2, and there's a package I might have already installed for activating those. They decided not to include env support or .env file support in Poetry core, but there's a new well, since Poetry version 1.2 has been released, now people can write plugins. So there's a new plugin. I may have added this already. Poetry self add, and let me just switch these windows. It's not quite as glaring. Yeah, so I've added that. And now, if I hop back in here, exit the shell, for example, and Poetry shell, echo debug is set to true. Likewise, Django didn't pick that up, so let's see. I might not be using it from an environment variable. Django debug. Okay, and then let me think here for a second if I want that to be named differently. I think it's good to prefix it with the Django. There we go. And I have to go into the project folder again. Now we should be good to go. Ooh, some unapplied migrations. That's right, because I've recloned this project. WCSD. So we'll run all of our migrations. We don't have quite that many. Most of these do come from our project. Some of them are Django core. It's my throwaway password, throwaway testing password. Now we can run the server. And we'll get a link, which I can copy, paste it, and that's not what I was trying to do. Terminal has no selection to copy. That makes it so. Copy. Weird. If I control click this, it'll open my default browser. That's not what I'm expecting. All right. Never. Localhost. I should just not save my passwords at all. That's not typically what I'm after. All right, good. So now we have a blank slate. I'll add a person. Add an activity. And so we've got this user interface here that lets me edit and delete. So when I click this button, nothing happens. So let's make that happen today. Interesting. I told it to auto white balance because I noticed that the video is pretty hot, and it did that. It's a little bit better. All right. So what we're going to need, essentially, we need a delete endpoint or a delete view. So right now we're on, this is on the person page, but the endpoint should probably be on the activity page. And on delete, it'll redirect you back to this person. So prior to deleting, we'll need to, it'll either need to accept a next argument in the URL, or prior to deletion, I'll have to override the logic to get that UUID from the URL so that I can perform the redirect, or create an endpoint here, delete activity that has the user ID in the URL. I think the more natural way to start would be to go to the view, not account, but activities, views, and see, I've got the create and delete, update, but not the delete view. So I'm kind of guessing at this point, and I would like to refer to the docs. Oof, I need to exclude this Geeks for Geeks from my search results. I don't like that site. There's a way to block sites from your Google. Call you blacklist. I just got to remember that name. Search results. You got the you blacklist, or you could call it you block list. I think would be a little bit better name. Block the site. Maybe that was because that's literally what you're doing. So I don't want to block the Django project. You block list should block geeks for geeks. Is you blacklist, but in any case, I could do for rename, but it's really handy. That geeks for geeks is just really spammy. And some of these other top ones are just kind of hitting Python, even duplicating content from Stack Overflow, so they really shouldn't come above Stack Overflow in my case, in my opinion. So Django generic editing views. We're going to look at the delete view, and in particular, how I can supply. There should be a get success URL, and I believe at that point I will have context. I think that should fire prior to. Well, let's take a look at how it works. So if I go to, I'm just gonna hit F12 here. Whoops, or Control F12 is not what I needed. No definition of that, even though. Okay. Yeah, VS Code doesn't have the super great support for poetry. For whatever reason, it's still not pulling that up there. Okay. Not a big deal. What if I open the file again? Or close the project and reopen it. Intelligence activated. Hot me to delete view. This, that worked. Okay, so now this has got a long inheritance chain, but base delete view I think is what we're looking. Base delete view init, form class, post, then you get this success URL. Aha, but you get it prior to deletion. So yeah, I can get, I believe if I override this get success URL, essentially I will redirect to that user ID. Yes, so let's go down here, model equals activity. Yes. And yeah, here we go. So I've already got this return redirect. Be self. Person ID, I believe that'll work. And then it'll delete. Cool. So let's wire it up to our URLs. And I think you just need to pass in the primary key in the URL. Man, that's bright. What if I turn on my backlight from the room? One moment. That way the ambient light's a little bit better. All right, so I'm just gonna try it. URLs. Actually, create. I don't know if these need to be in alphabetical order, but delete. Activity delete. No actions. And then what I need is to create a link, the reverse. Okay, this is a problem. A form that submits. This form that submits, it posts to the activity delete view with the this is what I need. All right, so let's hop back over here to the person. Activity template and have a modal dialogue. This template's getting heavy, and these are rendered multiple times. It's like really wasteful. So I'm gonna try to fix that. All right, so I've got this. I'm not gonna get too fancy with that. Method post now. I forget this. I should know, but action, and I need the reverse URL there. There we go. From action equals activity delete, the activity ID. I think we should be able to try that out now if I refresh with the server running. Run server. Refresh, delete activity, everything is whoa. Yeah, all I need is this actually. I'm thinking here for a second. Oh well, let me double check this. It's just the activity ID. It should already be hidden. So yeah, that's a bit confusing. I don't think I need the form at all. All right, so that's another thing. So I made the assumption and the context were wrong here. Let's just get this for a moment and set up a debugging statement right here. And run this in a Python debugger, which might have a little bit of problems. With the poetry environment. Yeah, that's kind of weird to call it that. Alright. Oh, I see what I did wrong. And I put the debugging statement in the wrong place. So I had to update view. That's easy mistake. And now this should work, but so if the form's not there, that's a different deal. It's weird because I don't need it to render a template and that kind of stuff, right? Or a form even, for that matter. I think here I would just need to implement that get object method. And have the request So yeah, I think delete view is a bit overkill. If I use this delete mixin, not sure how deep I need to get into the Django innards. So can I import that? Oh, yeah, it's not defined. That's cool. And it's not allowing me to. Django views generic edit deletion mixin. Generic. Good to go. So we don't need the model. What we need is self. Let's see. All right, so let's. I just need to debugger and take a quick look at the request as it comes in. I'm gonna refill up my tea. I'll be right back. Cool. So back to the code, or the view, and this person. And so interestingly, the activity was deleted. I was just getting weird error. So let's go ahead and let's try this deletion mixin. And I didn't put a debugging thing. Right. But in any case, I think that probably worked. No, all right. Delete self object equals self get object. That's what I'm doing, right? Self get object. Deletion mixin. Self request. But the get object isn't apparently able to access the request. What I think might have happened is this actually might be working, but I didn't refresh the debugger. No. I could just write a function-based view here, or just a regular view. Yeah, let's do that. All right, so let's write this post. I mean, I don't really need this. Query dict. Keyword recommends dictionary. All right. No messing around there. Yeah, okay, right. I need to do that before. All right, that was not so bad. A few lines of code. Just had to sort of get the framework out of the way a little bit, or drop down to a lower level in the framework. Not quite so low as a mix-in, but just a generic view actually. So mix-ins are kind of maybe orthogonal views. They get added into them. To provide certain functionality. Now this is a destructive action I should consider. Consider who can delete this. I think just the care coordinator as a first pass. So we're already using this. In fact, I probably already have a test function here. And in this case, to be explicit, only the person care organizers for now, until another use case emerges. So basically, since I'm attaching the self, the activity of the self up here to this view, I don't need to fetch it a second time, and that'll save a little bit of database overhead. Self.activity.delete. And users organizer is the only check. Now this is a bit verbose, but really I want to make it explicit that a user can delete activity. If they're an organizer, so that's what I'm checking here. Cool. I think that should work. So let's go ahead and refresh, see if I got any issues. Submit that. Delete that. All right. Oh yeah, and this is just PK. I could make it more explicit in the URL. That's the right way to do it. No. Oh yeah, and I probably don't even need to convert it. All right, go ahead. I fixed it. Now the tricky part, I just want to verify I should write a use case for this. Copy, new incognito window, join. In another session, I'm going to add more extensive UI tests. I forget the name of this framework, but I'm gonna add a UI testing framework that'll actually let me create scenarios like this. So I'll approve that person, and I'll log back in with that person. See, so good people saw me, and actually, not only should they not be able to do it, but they shouldn't see. There's a couple things here they shouldn't see. This, because they're forbidden from editing. And this, I suppose they can edit that. I don't have any, whoops, edit activity. Save, yeah. But delete, no, not so much. So Yeah, I'll include those in this pull request, since they're touching the same template and it's the exact same code. Let's go ahead and get this in there. Okay, well, wait a minute. So we don't need this deletion mix in anymore. I'm going to clean that up. Unused. I made some changes here. Okay, and this, yeah, needs the form so we can post to that endpoint. All right, so one other more thing. So if user is in such and such, okay, so this is on the person page. Whoops. Oh, actually, that was the person activity. Oops. I learned that it's a bit dangerous to make it so easy to remove yourself just by clicking on yourself. I should have a confirmation step there. It's easy to add yourself back, but it's a kind of low impact. So they can edit, but they should not be able to delete unless they're one of the organizers. Which means this person should not see the edit button or the delete activity. Very cool. Synchronize these changes. So that's about it. It's kind of a short session. I'll go ahead and see how best to review the code. Mark this is ready for review while the CI tests are running. And I think as a recap, I'll just scan through these files that I've changed. So we'll do a demo. Oh yeah, when I create my test user, my default super user that is, it doesn't allow me to create my name, so it uses the default value. Very cool. So for the review, I'll just use the browser only. And it is a bit bright. We almost need a night mode on this app. That would be kind of cool, actually. All right, you're ready? Hello and welcome to a recap of today's live code hangout. Today we've been working on the companionship care app. If you'd like to check out this code, it's open source on GitHub at github.com/companionshipcare. We've been working on a feature to delete scheduled activities. Essentially, this companionship care app allows caregivers to kind of coordinate activities that are meant to enrich a person's life, and that person may need some assistance with daily activities such as housework or doctor's appointments, running errands, and of course they want to go out and for tea and things like that. And the idea is that some companions can come together as a group, a companionship circle you could call it, and help to divide up the tasks for a particular person in need who may be living at home and just somewhat isolated. So this kind of idea came out of as a response to COVID, and also my personal experience and that of my some close friends who've got loved ones in similar situations where they're living at home largely independently but still need some basic help with certain types of activities. And the idea is that you schedule activities and people can join those, and you can add other caregivers to join them as well, remove and things like that, and mark it as complete, and edit them so you can change the type or date, things like that. And one feature that was missing was the ability to delete. So today we just added that feature real quickly. You know, not everything you schedule happens, and sometimes you make plans and you need to cancel them. So it made sense to add a deletion feature here. It wasn't too many lines of code overall. Most of those other features I mentioned have been under development, and if you're curious more about the project, again, we're on github.com/companionshipcare. But here's the lines of code that we needed to change in order to add the delete scheduled activity feature. So I'm going to kind of go top to bottom, but what we've done is created a view and mapped that to a URL in our activities apps. So you go to delete and then the activity ID, and it renders that view. The activity delete view is inheriting from the Django base view, and it also includes user passes test mixin, which will allow you to run some arbitrary code to make sure that the user who's making a request to this view has, is authorized to do so. And our test function checks that the person making the request is one of the care organizers. Only the person's care organizers can delete the activity. The person here being that focal point of care, where the care group is oriented around a single person. It's person-centric care. So we grab the activity we've passed in from the URL, as I showed up here, the activity ID, and we just get that out of the URL, and we assign it to self.activity. Self here is referencing the view. So we fetch the activity from the activities table, and we're going to check that the user who's making that request is a member of the activity person organizers. So the activity that we're looking at has a related person being that focal point of care, person-centric care. And that person has some care organizers. So I actually might rename this to care organizers or care coordinators. I have another task to do that, to kind of like solidify the language in this project so it's consistent. But these are care organizers. So it's like, one or two people who are coordinating more, like a broader group of people who are willing to participate, but maybe not take the initiative to coordinate everybody. You can have multiple organizers though, coordinators. And essentially, since I'm checking that they can delete the activity, I just aliased it here so that if they're an organizer, they can delete the activity. That way it's kind of explicit what I'm trying to check for. And another user passes test mix in, you could be an organizer or a participant in the activity to edit the activity, for example. And so if they do pass this test function, then it'll go ahead and process. This is a post request that's coming across from when you initiate or submit. This is actually a form. We'll see in a minute. When you initiate that request with the delete, it'll post to the URL of this view. And since in this user passes test mix and we grab the activity and assign it to self.activity, we can now reference it here. That saves us another database call. So hence I assigned it to self. Otherwise, if we weren't going to reference this activity again, then I wouldn't have needed that step. I'm not sure how much we're saving in doing that, but less is more. So fewer times you have to look, something up by ID. It's maybe a little bit more efficient. And basically, we get the person ID from the activity, and this doesn't have to be in this order, and then we delete the activity. So it might actually, if I have this if I call this self-activity delete, then I would no longer be able to get the person ID. So come to think of it, it's probably required that I grab the person ID there. And assuming everything would go well here, I didn't write any kind of try catch, but we'll redirect to the person detail view for that person ID. So you notice that when I delete an activity, it feels like I never left this page, and that's because it's redirecting me back to that page from the view. It happens instantaneously on my local machine, and it's not too big of a performance. We've deployed it to the cloud, these particular types of operations. I haven't deployed this branch yet. And essentially, we've got two other parts to the template, two parts in the template. One is this activity card was getting a bit busy, and so I needed a way to allow more actions, but not clutter things up and detract from the really important things, like showing that this activity doesn't have any participants and allowing you to manage them and mark it as done. So we just added a new button with a drop down here that has these actions, this action button. So that's essentially what we do. And this is just regular Bootstrap 5 semantics. So you define a button group and you put buttons in there. You put a button in there that toggles the drop down, and then an owner ordered list with list items that essentially are the items in that drop down menu. You don't have to give them any particular classes. They happen to be buttons. And this is where you needed a class that are classed as drop down items. We didn't need to add that on the list item itself, and it seems to render fine from what I can see. It looks decent to me. So one of them was a button that we already had, the edit activity, and both of these toggle a modal, and that modal is rendered once for each activity. So actually this template is starting to get pretty heavy. There's two modals rendered basically for this one activity. When I add another activity, two more modals get rendered. So I'm gonna have to figure out a more efficient way of doing this. But it's basically the same thing with the confirmation for the delete activity. We have another modal down here called the confirmation modal, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. But one thing is, since we have this rule here, this user passes test that they have to be a care organizer, we want that to be reflected in the user interface as well. So only the care organizers should really be able to see this button even, let alone call the URL to make to delete the activity. So that way the user interface is again consistent with the behavior of the backend. And here's the modal dialog. This is again just regular Bootstrap dialog. We faded in. It's called delete activity confirmation modal. You'll notice that each modal is uniquely keyed. And again, these are like, you have 10 scheduled activities here. You'll have 20 modals at least. And so it's kind of a mess. And that's one of the things I need to figure out is how I can parameterize this so I have just one of each modal rendered and then pass in the data rather than rendering that on the server and sending it over the wire. But I've been very light on the JavaScript, but this is one issue where I think it'll pay dividends to have a little bit of JavaScript here. Not a whole front-end framework by any means, but a little bit of JavaScript can improve the user experience. I'm not averse to using JavaScript. I just don't want to commit to a whole front-end framework and build tool and all that kind of stuff and having to write API endpoints and things like that. It's just way too much complexity for this style of project. So we've got some UI text. All of our text we're trying to internationalize. So you can delete the activity. It prompts you, are you sure about that? And then it has a form embedded that calls the activity delete view and passes in the activity ID. So pretty standard Django form and processing stuff. We're actually not even, it's not really, Django's not handling this form, it's just we're using it so it can post to the server actually. And again, that gets posted here to this view. Has the activity ID argument, and that comes in mapped from this view, and that's called the activity delete view, and that's where we use it here. So just wiring everything up pretty much. It's not a lot of bespoke code. We're just really using Bootstrap classes and really basic Django templating syntax. One other thing I noticed is that there is on the person detail page a button that allows you to edit the person, and only the care organizer really has that privilege. Anybody else will get an authorized error. So that was an example of the user interface being out of sync with the way the backend behaved, and so I thought I would just clean that up since I'm in the code right there and already in the mindset. So not a lot of lines of code. Took some figuring out, but mainly just reading some documentation and a bit of trial and error. So that's about it. Thanks again for watching. Stop on by GitHub if you've got any questions or comments, and there's also several low-hanging fruit tasks that are good first issues, and we'd appreciate some help. I might register this project with Hacktoberfest as well, so stay tuned for that. Thanks again for your time, and I hope you're doing well.